So welcome to another deep dive. Today we are exploring this incredibly dense, multi-layered article by Vega, and it's called The Martian Triangulation of the District of Columbia.
And I have to say, it is an absolute puzzle box of a text. I mean, for anyone who loves connecting dots across wildly disparate fields, this author really delivers. He takes traditional urban planning and just smashes it together with celestial mechanics and like ancient Sumerian mythology and these really intense numerical synchronicities. The author posits that the American continent was designated, supposedly as early as the 1740s, to be the new Atlantis. According to this text, Washington, D.C. wasn't built just to be a pragmatic federal capital. It was chosen from the very beginning to be the global headquarters of a new world order.
A destiny to lead the world into what the author explicitly describes as the kingdom of the AntiChrist. And this raises an important question. If D.C. is meant to be this celestial, world-dominating capital, whose blueprint is it actually following? Like, who is the architect behind the scenes?
Because to answer that, the author drags us from these really broad, esoteric concepts down to the literal asphalt, like the physical layout of the city.
The actual street level.
Yeah, I mean, we all know Pierre-Charles L'Enfant designed the district back in 1791, but the text claims this design was specifically drawn up as an homage to an entity called the Queen of Heaven. And more than that, it's a physical map of Mars. The author claims that the layout of Washington is this encrypted Luciferian design. And he says it was implemented shortly after Freemasonry assumed leadership of this New World Order in 1782.
And when you overlay that Martian map onto the Potomac River, the author identifies three main architectural components that's like locked together perfectly. So let's walk through them so you can picture it. First, you have Rosslyn, Virginia. It's the financial center just across the river. The author states this corresponds perfectly to a formation on Mars known as the Pleiades Pyramid City.
Okay, so that's piece number one.
And second, you have the White House compound. The text points out that its footprint is a squircle, which is literally a squared-off circle. And the author says that specific geometric shape directly mirrors the famous face on Mars.
The one from the Viking 1 photos. And the third component is perhaps the most heavily emphasized in the whole text. That's the Pentagon. The author matches the Pentagon directly to a structure in the Cydonia region known as the D&M Pentagon, which is described as this massive, fortress-like formation.
The Pentagon obviously houses the Department of War. And Mars, in ancient mythology, is universally recognized as the planet of war.
It's crucial to understand that the author doesn't believe this Martian triangulation is unique to Washington, D.C. He theorizes that all prominent world capitals utilize this exact same Cydonia template. It's described as a literal signature of sacred knowledge, like a global architectural composition that extends back to ancient pyramid sites on both Earth and Mars.
So it's like a repeating stamp.
The author argues that the true rulers of Earth have hidden this signature in plain sight, just etching it right into the very geography of our centers of power.
Well, if the city is a giant signature, that naturally leads to the next massive question. Why build it? I mean, what is the functional purpose of etching a Martian map into a city grid?
The author isn't just talking about aesthetic choices or, mere artistic tributes. He theorizes that these geometric layouts, specifically these hexagram motifs found in the Martian map, function as literal combination locks. The idea is that this sacred geometry creates a stargate, like a mechanism designed to pierce spiritual dimensions.
Are we talking about like a metaphor for secret knowledge here? Or does the author mean the physical concrete, the asphalt, the monuments of D.C. are literally functioning as a machine?
He treats it as an active technology, an esoteric machine built of stone and street grids.
A stargate right in the middle of D.C. And who is supposed to be coming through that stargate? Because this is where the text dives incredibly deep into ancient mythology. The author introduces a figure named Allelu.
So Allelu is the god of war in certain ancient Sumerian-style chronicles. And according to the author's interpretation of these texts, which, by the way, he claims date back to before Noah's flood and perhaps even before the creation of mankind, Allelu was the former king of a planet called Nibiru, and for his transgressions, he was exiled to Mars.
So we have an exiled cosmic king. But the author doesn't just, leave it in the realm of ancient myth. He builds a bridge directly into biblical theology. The text claims that this Allelu character is actually the biblical Lucifer.
And that is the absolute linchpin of the theological framework here. The author states that Allelu, or Lucifer, has followers here on Earth. He specifically ties them to secret society brotherhoods, like the Freemasons, who he claims took over the New World Order in 1782. And these followers are allegedly using these synchronized ley lines, this exact Cydonia pattern, to prepare for his resurrection. They are literally using the city grid to actively wait for him to return and be enthroned again as king over the whole earth.
We are talking about city streets acting as landing pads for an exiled Martian king who is also the biblical devil.
It is a massive claim.
It completely flips our standard understanding of geopolitics into this grand cosmic theater. In fact, the author explicitly claims that the U.S. president, the actual person sitting in the Oval Office commanding the military, does not actually have the power we think they do.
Yeah, the text calls the president an actor or a performer.
Right, just legally bribed performer while the true rulers manage the globe from the shadows.
It is a total recontextualization of global power dynamics. And to support this idea of shadow rulers, the author points to a specific biblical passage. It's 1 Corinthians 2:8-10, which mentions the rulers of this age, or the archons.
Let's slow down and explain that for a second, because archons is a heavy piece of jargon.
It is. So in the author's framework, these archons aren't just spiritual metaphors for like greed or systemic corruption. He claims they are mingled fallen angel seed. Specifically, he uses the term Nephilim bloodlines. In biblical lore, the Nephilim were the offspring of angels mating with humans. The author's twist here is that these bloodlines never actually left Earth. They survived, they integrated, and they became the literal ruling class.
And according to the text, these archons control every single aspect of modern society. Through food, finances, and fuel, it's all run by these secret brotherhoods in one massive hidden layer. So the architecture of the capital isn't just passive stone.
No, not at all.
It is a broadcast mechanism, like a portal built by these archons to facilitate the return of their leader.
That is the core of the Stargate theory.
Just when you think you understand the Martian overlay, the author decides to just, add more tracing paper to the stack. Here's where it gets really interesting. He layers ancient Egypt and celestial star charts on top of the exact same city grid.
It's just layer upon layer upon layer.
Think of the DC grid as an architectural Swiss Army knife. Just like pulling out different tools from the same handle, the author pulls out different maps. You look at it from one angle, and the city is a map of Mars. Pivot the tool, and suddenly, the exact same streets are a copy of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Pivot it again, and it's a mirror of the stars.
The author genuinely believes the Great Pyramid pattern is incorporated into the overall design of the core of the district, and it's veiled perfectly by the street layouts.
Let's trace that out for the listener, because the geometry he proposes is incredibly specific. In this Egyptian layer, the White House acts as the Great Pyramid's king's chamber. And the author also notes that the White House serves as the apex, or pinnacle, of a broken pentagram formed by the surrounding streets.
And then you have the Washington Monument, right, the massive obelisk on the National Mall. In the author's Egyptian model, this represents the Queen's Chamber. And the text makes a very specific point of highlighting that the monument is actually purposely off-center from the White House.
And the author definitely doesn't see that as just like a surveying error from the 1800s. He calls the obelisk Baal's shaft, representing a phallus. The text explicitly describes this as a male-female motif.
It gets very symbolic.
The obelisk, pegged to the Queen's chamber, is supposedly meant to harness the sexual energies of Lucifer for the powers of creation and reproduction.
It is a highly esoteric, almost magical interpretation of civic monuments.
And what does the Oval Office represent in this whole pyramid metaphor?
It correlates to the sarcophagus found inside the king's chamber.
The Oval Office is the sarcophagus. I mean, that is a haunting image. But you mentioned earlier that this Swiss Army knife has a third tool. It's not just locked to the earth, it's mirrored in the sky. The author theorizes that the District of Columbia is also a star chart tracking the constellation of Orion.
Yes, the blazing star of Orion. The text points out that if you overlay this star chart on the city, specific stars match up with specific modern buildings.
Which brings us back to the why. Like, why Orion? What's the connection there?
Well, in the author's theological framework, Orion is associated with a celestial being, a cherubim, again, identifying this figure as Lucifer, who allegedly ruled Earth during a forgotten golden age long before modern humanity.
But wait, if Lucifer is from Orion, how does Mars fit back into the picture? I thought he was an exiled Martian king.
Mars, in this context, was just a station, a stopping point. The author claims that many of these fallen angels used Mars as a temporary base when they, as the text says, left their first estate in the days before Adam.
So the city layout is honoring their origin in the stars, their temporary outpost on Mars, and their grand monuments in ancient Egypt, all at the exact same time. But we have to move from the geography and the mythology into the mathematics, because these buildings aren't just marking physical space. According to the author, they are keeping time, celestial time.
What's fascinating here is how the author uses mathematics to attempt to prove a timeline. Because he isn't just saying these shapes look similar, he is running the numbers. He believes this sacred geometry acts as a cosmic clock,
Cracking what, exactly?
tracking the lifespan of the American Republic and counting down to the completion of what the secret societies call the Great Work.
And the great work, according to the text, is the building of Lucifer's temple on earth, which the author claims will ultimately usurp a third temple yet to be built in Jerusalem, and the math the author uses to support this countdown. Well, let's just walk through it together. Let's start with the latitude of Washington, D.C.
Okay, so DC's latitude is approximately 38.96 degrees. The author takes that geographic coefficient and divides it by 2. Well, the author often relies on principles of duality, as above, so below, male and female, to justify dividing or multiplying by 2. To the author, however, dividing 38.96 by 2 yields roughly 19.47. And he directly connects that resulting number to the year 1947.
Oh, yes, Roswell.
Specifically, the famous UFO incident in Roswell, New Mexico.
So the latitude of the city secretly points to a UFO crash. Then he looks at the distance to Jerusalem. D.C. was founded in the year 1790. The author takes that founding year, 1790, and multiplies it by what he calls a fractal base of 3.3.
Right, which is an extrapolation of 33, a number highly revered in Freemasonry, representing the highest degree a Mason can attain.
I mean, I have to point out the logical leap here. Multiplying a calendar year by a secret society's favorite number to find a geographic distance is, but if you multiply 1790 by 3.3, you get exactly 5,907.
And 5,907 happens to be the exact distance in statute miles from the Washington Monument to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. He argues the founding date of 1790 was specifically chosen by the architects to reflect the geographic distance to the ultimate site of their great work.
For the author, there is no such thing as a coincidence in the universe. Every coordinate, every historical date, every mile marker is read like an intricate escape room puzzle designed by these unseen celestial architects. So let's look at the actual countdown he proposes. He introduces a pyramid time theory based on the biblical concept of Sabbath cycles.
A Sabbath cycle is a biblical timekeeping method that breaks years into 7-year segments, mirroring the 7 days of creation.
And he starts this specific countdown for the modern USA with the attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City on September 11, 2001. From there, he counts forward in 7-year increments.
So from 2001, you add 7 years to get to the financial crisis of 2008, then another 7 to 2015, then 2022.
Leading to a culmination point in the years 2029 to 2030. He sees this timeline as the ticking clock for the physical manifestation of the New World Order.
And he ties this time clock back to the Great Pyramid of Giza again, specifically focusing on the year 2016. The author notes that the year 2016 corresponded to the year 5776 in the traditional Jewish calendar. He then links that number, 5776, directly to the Great Pyramid, noting its height without the capstone is 481 feet, which he calculates into exactly 5,776 inches.
But he adds that when you include the capstone, you have to add an additional 7 years, which feeds right back into his Sabbath cycle countdown.
It's an incredibly complex blending of different dating systems. He also points out that in the Masonic calendar, the period of 2015 to 2016 corresponded to the year 1776, which is known as Anno Lucis, or the Year of Light.
And since the author equates the bringer of light with Lucifer, he interprets this as Lucifer's year. He speculates that this was a period when the hidden agenda was pushed significantly forward, setting the stage for that 2030 culmination. So, what does this all mean? We've gone down quite the rabbit hole today.
We really have.
We've looked at the capital of the United States through a lens where city planners are secretly laying out a Martian Stargate, where the monuments form a pyramid time clock counting down to the 2030s, where the entire grid is a landing pad for an exiled cosmic king waiting to return and claim a new temple.
It is a synthesis of geography, theology, and numerology. But if we step back, it forces you to look at the mundane architecture of a city, the streets you drive on, the buildings you walk past, and ask questions. Who built this? And for what true purpose?
It definitely changes how you look at a map, that's for sure. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought drawn from how the source text interprets the book of Genesis. The author casually mentions that the creation of Adam in the Garden of Eden wasn't actually the beginning of the story. In his view, the creation of humanity was merely an incursion, a beachhead, moved by Jehovah to reclaim Earth from these fallen angels who had already been here for ages. If Earth is truly a cosmic battlefield, as the author suggests, and world capitals are weaponized grids of ancient geometry, what secret celestial blueprints might be hiding in the layout of the very city or town you live in right now?